All right, so to continue on our commands tour, we know what the set attribute command does. I'm going to show you quickly what the get attribute command does, which is pretty much what it sounds like it does. So let's change this to be the selection. And then instead of set attribute, it's a get attribute, and it doesn't take a second parameter because it's not really setting anything. You're just grabbing it. So here you can see all the attributes we have. And then it's going to basically store or return what this is. So you can do things like print visibility, so you can check if something is hidden or shown. You can toggle it, so you can do, you can see if it's visible. So let's do this real quick. Visible is whether true or false, so you can say if not visible, or you can even do something fancier. So set attribute, select visibility. Cool. So basically what we did is we grabbed if it's visible or not. So here just get the attribute visibility and then set the attribute visibility to not, which is going to be the opposite of whatever your variable is. So if this came true, then this is going to set it to false. And then if this is false, then this is going to be true. So it lets you toggle visibility easy. It's the same as Control H, so it's kind of a useless script. But you can see where this could be useful in other cases too, where you have an export flag that you want to flag everything and basically toggle export, or any real properties that you want to try to set on an attribute. Say you have a rig that you want to turn something on or off. You can switch all of IKFK to basically on to off to on. You guys get the idea. Okay, so the next command that we want to show or talk about is the xform command, and that one is just a more powerful get attribute, and it's mainly dealing with transforms, so it's like positions and rotations. It's really useful because it can let you get world space values, which are kind of crucial. So one thing that it can do, so let's show an example. So we can do xform, and then we can pass relative flag and say we want to set the rotation to. So what this is going to do is basically rotate our sphere 90 degrees, which rotating the wrong 90. So it's kind of nice. If you want to write a little tool that basically lets you rotate in 15 degrees increments, or whatever increments you want. Then the other thing that this is really powerful, that one is kind of gimmicky. The one that is actually used a lot is as a center pivots flag, which is, as you can imagine, invaluable. You're going to use this one a lot. So, and then the real reason we always use this guy is to get that world space translation. And the way you get the world space translation, and this one is a little buggy, is you actually grab the rotate pivot. So this is like pro tip. So what I did here was, and let's change this to be translation. We're querying, so we're basically saying that I don't want to set this variable, I want to grab it, and then I want to turn the world space because I want the world space coordinates of the rotate pivot, which is going to be where the object is placed, because the pivot is where its origin is. And it does have a translation, but I'll show you how it's not always awesome. So this works great. If I go here and I freeze the transforms, it doesn't really work. And it's kind of crappy because you're still passing it the world space flag, so you would expect it to work, but it doesn't. But you learn to live with those things and you find workarounds. So the workaround in this case is using that rotate pivot flag, which will give you the proper X, Y, and Z coordinates for the translation. So now that I have this translation, I can actually set it to someone else, right? So I can store this and I can say, I have two things selected. I want to grab the position of the first one, set it to the second one. So the other cool Python command is you can do for I select in enumerate selection. So what this enumerate does, it basically returns a counter and the selection. So if we print what I is and what selection is, it's going to do 0 and then 1. So if we have going to give you 0, 1, 2, 3. So what we can do, say, is if I equals 0, this is going to be our first one. You want to grab that translation. And then else, we want to set the translation. And this one, we don't want the query flag. We want to set it. You want world space to be true. Then we want translation, because we don't want to move the pivot. We really want to move the object, so that's the kind of tricky thing that you have to get over with. Let's see if this works. Ooh, almost. Let's see why this didn't work. Okay, so this need to go back to before I started doing the setting, because mine is stupid. And let's try to see if we can rescue this. All right, so now that we want to actually set the pivot, or not the pivot, the positions, we want to use the move command, because like you saw, the xform command is kind of silly. So we can do move. And then the way the move command works is you're going to pass translation 0. It's going to be the X, the Y, and the Z, then your selection. And then there's this RPR equals true, which means going to be rotate pivot relative. So it's basically we want to move this distance based on the rotation pivot, which is kind of a way to trick Maya into working. So I want to select this guy. That's going to be the first one. That's where I want to snap all my objects to. Then you press it and it goes. So that's kind of an easy way to snap objects together. The other way sometimes you want to do is you want to grab the transforms of an object, and then you want to create a locator for every object in the scene. We're going to do that with joints a little bit later. But yeah, that's how you would snap an object together, or two objects together. There is an easier way though. So the easier way is going to be to use the parent constraint, and we can store the first object like so. So now we basically know that the first object is the selection. We can do selection 0, but whatever. It's a little bit easier to read. What we want to do is commands parent constraint. Then you want to do first object selection. So that's basically going to snap that object. We can do a point constraint. In this case, if we just want the translation, so the parent constraint is going to give you both translation and rotation, but that's okay. and then we delete the constraint. So let's see if this works. And it works, and it does exactly the same thing, but it also does rotation, which in this case we don't have any. But it's the same way. Not the same thing, but in Maya there's going to be 15 different ways you can do solve a problem. So one of the ways is you can grab the information and copy it over, or if you want, you can use the parent constraint and then delete it. Both methods are valid. The parent constraint is easier because the example that I showed you, we only had the translations. So if we wanted to do translation and rotations, you just have to duplicate that code into another line to where not only you do the move, but you also do the rotation. So that's why sometimes I just prefer to do the parent constraint, because with it, you can kind of ignore the kind of world space nonsense too. You don't have to be grabbing rotate pivots and using one command for something and the other command for another thing. So, but that should give you a good basic understanding of a lot of the 90% of the scripts you're going to be writing. So a lot of it is, especially if you're an artist, just kind of getting into it is just going to be things to make your workflow better. Be able to select anything that matches a word, do something to all the selected objects, snap the objects together, move things left and right. I'm going to go through in a future chapter a little more specific examples that are more practical if you didn't think these kind of were practical enough, but these are kind of just to get your first taste of what some of the powerful things you can do and how once you start scripting, you kind of want to just write scripts because you become lazy, and that's why we're technical artists, because we're just lazy artists. And I hope you enjoyed it. Now let's go into some more commands and get a little bit deeper into it.